Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Armand, and I'm the Deputy Director for Community Engagement at the MBTA. I'll be the moderator for tonight's meeting, and we really appreciate you joining us tonight, both in person and virtually. So thank you for joining us. Just one moment. We're going to allow for some few folks to attend virtually and join in on the meeting. So hang tight. Okay, great. Tonight's meeting is to share information and receive feedback on the MBTA's Lynnway Multimodal Corridor Project. Philip Cherry is our Senior Project Manager here at the T at the Bus Transit Priority Team, and he'll be giving a presentation. We ask that you hold all comments until the end of the presentation, but before we get started, just for the people on Zoom, we're going to go over a few announcements and meeting controls for folks that aren't familiar with Zoom. The first is that all MBTA activities, including public meetings, are free of discrimination. The MBTA complies with all federal and state civil rights requirements preventing discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, limited English proficiency, and additional protected characteristics. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, we ask that you visit us at the website linked there to reach the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. Additionally, we'd like to let you know that we'll be offering interpretation for this meeting, both virtually and in person, in Spanish. If you need language assistance in person, we ask that you come into the check-in table right here at the front of the room and get a translation headset and work with Edwin, our translator. Here in the virtual chat, we have Enrica, who's here for Spanish interpretation. If you need that, please join and click on the small globe icon to access Enrica. If you have any clarifying questions, we ask that you type it in the chat during the meeting or following the presentation, and we'll assist you. If you have any technical support questions that you have as well, we ask that you just message technical support, and we'll be able to assist you, or public engagement, MBTA. Closed captioning is also available. We ask that you click on this closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen, and you're able to click and drag the captions to better see the presentation. You can also adjust the captioning size as well. And with that, I'll hand it off to Philip Cherry to go over the presentation.
Can we cover the chat?
Yes.
Thank you all so much for being here. I know you all are very busy. I know it takes a lot to come out to give feedback like this. As Ashley said, there we go. Is that better? Yes. Thank you. As Ashley said, my name is Philip Cherry. I'm a senior project manager on the MBTA's Transit Priority Team. We are here tonight with several folks from the MBTA and our consultant team, as well as folks on the back end helping out. As Ashley mentioned, I may be speaking slowly in case there is a need for translation, so if I'm waiting at the end of a slide, that's why. We've already gone over introductions.
Philip, we'll just need to pause for one moment because it looks like on Zoom, Enrica cannot hear you. Can you say one more thing?
Sure, let me try. Test.
Okay, we're good now.
We're good? Okay, excellent. You guys have heard who we are. We are going to give an overview of sort of how this project came to be and talk about the outreach activities that we've been doing. And then we will have a Q&A period up until 7:30 from both all of you in the room as well as folks here on Zoom. For those who've been here for the open house, we appreciate your time. I think you'll find that there's probably some redundancy from what we're about to present here as to what's on those slides, but certainly appreciate your attendance. So going over the project here in the next couple of slides, many folks have been wondering sort of where did this project emanate from? What was the driving purpose that led us to look at redesigning the Lynnway? And what are the limits of this project? We've gotten a lot of feedback, especially at our roll plot over there, about not only work along the Lynnway, but also other parts of the roadways near the Lynnway. This project is 1.6 miles long, approximately, from the existing General Edwards Bridge, which connects Revere to Lynn and runs up the Lynnway to Market Street, hangs a left, and ends at the MBTA busway right out there. Where did this project emanate from? The City of Lynn, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR, and the MBTA, as well as MassDOT, have all led a number of different planning and study efforts over the last 4 to 5 years that have pointed to the need for a safer, more connecting, and more multimodal Lynnway. This is a fairly unique project in terms of the number of agencies that are involved. I'm here with the MBTA. We are leading the concept development and the outreach of this phase, what we're doing right now. We obviously operate buses. This corridor is also unique because there's ferry service nearby that the MBTA operates, and then not too far away is also commuter rail service. So this is a fairly, what we would call multimodal area within our network. This project is entirely within the City of Lynn. We're coordinating with them very closely. There's been a lot of planning efforts that they've led, and obviously a lot of other adjacent public and private projects to coordinate with. DCR owns this roadway, including the traffic signals and the maintenance, so we've been coordinating closely with them. Their project manager, unfortunately, was double booked on short notice tonight. And then MassDOT applied for a grant that I'll talk about later. They are leading the replacement of the General Edwards Bridge, which is at the southern limit of this project. I know that's garnered a lot of interest from folks both tonight and at previous public projects, or public meetings, excuse me, that we've had. It is my understanding that they will likely have a meeting about that project later this fall. I don't know, I think probably closer to November, but I don't have an exact date for you. We are coordinating with them closely, but we are not leading that project. Slide. Just to orient everybody, especially those joining us virtually who weren't in the room to look at the roll plot, this is the corridor project limits. Again, about 1.5, 1.6 miles, starting at the northern limit of the existing General Edwards Bridge that, like I said, will be rebuilt. And it runs north along the Lynnway to Market Street, hangs a left, and then really kind of hangs a right into the busway. We've just highlighted some of the places of interest along here. Obviously, there's a lot of exciting work happening along the Lynnway. I know the new Harbor Park, some new developments. It's my understanding that the Heritage State Park will also be improved, and that's a DCR project. So just using this slide here to sort of set the lay of the land of where this project is located. Looking at the need for this project for various studies, this is a top crash corridor regardless of how you're traveling. So MassDOT takes all the crashes in the state and does a variety of analyses on those and identifies either singular intersections or what they refer to as clusters of where those crashes occur. And unfortunately, this corridor is a top motor vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian crash cluster within the state of Massachusetts. And I believe that means it's in the top 200 for each of those in terms of all of the roadways in the entire Commonwealth. So no matter how you're traveling here, the data shows that it is not a safe corridor. I'm sure many of you may drive along the roadway, but for those who walk or take other modes or ride the bus, there's very narrow sidewalks next to fairly high-speed traffic, especially during the middle of the day or at night. Obviously, as many of us are familiar, there are periods where there are significant congestion on the corridor. From a transit perspective, there's another slide that will talk about some of the ridership, delays, and future service, but that's combined with the fact that 19% of every Lynn household and 50% of the households near this corridor don't own a motor vehicle. So that was another motivator to look at this corridor to serve a variety of folks traveling. I think one of the biggest points of reference when people talk about the Lynnway, especially at some of the other outreach we've done, is people refer to it as a barrier. Along those 1.6 miles, there's only 6 signalized crossings. We've had folks say, I work in this building and I want to go get a bite to eat across the street, but I have to walk nearly 3/4 of a mile to a traffic signal to cross and go to the restaurant on the other side of the street to get where they're going. So part of what we want to look at is, are there additional places that we can put a safe pedestrian crossing at a place that makes sense here? Some of the other studies identified that there's a lack of bike facilities between some recreational areas, as you approach the Rotary and the Hunt, and as you get closer to Revere, the Wonderland area on the Blue Line. And then a significant point of feedback that we'd heard even in the studies, but even recently during this outreach process from many folks who've attended, is the need to accommodate freight access. This is certainly a light industrial corridor, and there's a lot of full tractor trailers that travel through here, and making sure whatever sort of redesign would be considered, that we are cognizant of those large movements and doing what we can to make those more predictable and safer for everybody. From a transit perspective, when you look at that entire corridor and include the busway, there was about 3,000 boardings and alightings per day within this 1.6 mile project limit. That includes 3 bus routes that operate along the Lynnway, and an additional, depending on how you count them, up to 6 routes at the busway. So this, if you look at the context of the entire North Shore, this area really is kind of a transit hub. Obviously, there's not a blue, red, orange, green line out here, but within the context of serving Lynn, the Hunt, Salem, that entire area and points in between, the hub of that service is really the busway that's just beyond the building we're in here at the community college. And together across those routes, they serve about 70,000 weekly riders. Many of you, may say the bus doesn't come frequently enough today. The MBTA's bus network redesign, which is a network-wide planning effort to look at how we can increase bus service, has a plan in place for the Lynnway to increase that service to at least every 12 minutes, all day, every day, from start of service, 5 or 6 a.m. up to the very end of service. And then I think the other piece that we've talked about and several of these studies have pointed out is there's obviously new developments ongoing, especially in the southern part of the corridor, and want to make sure that there's adequate transit to serve, I believe it's somewhere in the 1,300 to 1,500 housing unit range that are going to be there. So those are all part of the context that we've been considering. And when you look at those needs, that fed into goals of safer and more frequent pedestrian crossings, a roadway that's more safe and more calm, transit service that is not only faster and more reliable, but more comfortable. We've heard a lot of feedback about traffic signals that are not efficient, that are really using out-of-date hardware and software. Looking at, is it possible to make safe bike connections from some of the other bike facilities that are being implemented or were implemented to other key recreational locations? And then working closely with the city of Lynn, there's been a lot of visioning efforts around the South Harbor Implementation Plan, Vision Lynn, and other planning efforts. How can the Lynnway better complement a transformational vision for what this area will look like in not only the next year, but potentially the next 5 or 10 years? Many folks have asked sort of where are we in this process? For those in the room, this is kind of a mirror image of that timeline slide over there. The top left of these rectangles refers to a lot of the different planning studies. You can see the Lynn Transit Action Plan, DCR Parkways Master Plan, several other city, MBTA, DCR, MassDOT-led efforts. Those were done, like I said, over the last 5 to 6 years. And here we are today, kind of in the top center, looking at data collection and existing conditions. So we do not yet have a concept to present to you. Some of those planning efforts have developed brainstormed ideas of a concept, but none of those are listed as sort of the default. We're pulling the best ideas we can from some of those. We're very much here listening to all of you and a survey that I'll refer to later. And then there's a lot of existing conditions. How many cars travel on this roadway? What is the ground survey here? What are other projects that we need to coordinate with, whether they're private developments or the General Edwards Bridge replacement, many other public projects. We're getting a variety of different inputs in this phase. So you may have attended, I think I see a few of you who were at a previous meeting we had in early June at the Lynn Museum. We came back today because we felt we needed to hear more. We know that doing this right at the end of June, at the end of school, people might be traveling, so now school is back. We wanted to make sure we gave another opportunity for folks to give us feedback. We will shift from this phase into concept development. So that means, putting these ideas, listening to your ideas, your constraints, your feedback, and all of the engineering and analysis, and developing a concept, likely concepts to some degree. There's probably going to be some optionality to try to say, hey, what if we did X, Y, or Z in looking at that? And our goal is to get that in the fall of this year. This is the rest of this is sort of typical for any sort of transportation planning project where you'd move from concept development, you vet that with the community, and then you move into more detailed engineering, which for a corridor of this size will take some time. And that detailed engineering actually has a couple of different milestones where we would likely be, well, we would definitely be interfacing with you, but it's usually you may have heard of like 30% design or 70% design. So there's a couple of different opportunities to interface. And then that would move into construction. And, you know, for everybody in the room and joining us online, I really want to highlight, this says 2027 to 2030. We don't have a concept yet, but I think we're very confident in saying we don't expect this to be a 4-year construction timeline. I'm just putting this here because it's possible detailed engineering takes longer and you're starting this in 2028 or later, or maybe this is a less impactful project and it's a shorter period of time. So I can't pin, and nobody on the project team can pin an exact construction timeline, but I really want to clarify we are not projecting this to be a 4-year process. In terms of project funding, this has been a question. Some of you may have seen an announcement now several years ago. MassDOT applied for a US DOT RAISE grant to help fund the redesign and reconstruction of the Lynnway. That was awarded in the spring of 2022, and that awarded just over $20 million federal dollars to look at that. The potential scope of that includes pedestrian improvements, bus lanes, bike lanes, roadway improvements, traffic signal improvements, green space, or other public realm infrastructure to receive that funding. So it's kind of hard to explain, but we have been awarded that, but we don't actually get to get that money unless we meet certain criteria. And so we're meeting with you today to advance that concept, to get to the point where we can do certain environmental reviews and get certain cost estimations, and then that would be something that we share and apply, sort of get over that final hump to get the funding, what's called obligated, within the parlance of the US DOT. I'm just going to drink some water. So that was the main presentation about the project, which, again, isn't word for what's in this room, but there's a lot of overlap. I do want to highlight to folks in the room and virtually that all of the boards in this room have already been uploaded to our website. So if you have interest in seeing those later, they are all uploaded online. This presentation will be recorded and will be online. And actually, a few months ago, kind of an abridged version of this was already recorded and it's online. So that information should align very well. Obviously, I'm not speaking exactly like I did previously, but there's a lot of alignment between those. So for anybody who wants to view this or who couldn't make it tonight, that information will be there. This next section is going to talk about what we've done for outreach and what's yet to come, just so folks are aware, and really what the goal of this phase of outreach is. Many of you obviously have heard about this project. You're in the room, you're here virtually, you've participated in a survey before, but at this phase, we really want to make sure folks are aware of this project. We're in the thick of it every day, and I can appreciate that, you know, we've pushed this on social media and through elected officials and otherwise, but there's always more we can do for you all to be aware. So we want to, you know, that's really the first and primary goal, and then a critical goal beyond that is gathering feedback about what works and doesn't work on the Lynnway today, and what do you have ideas for this, for a concept. You know, I think many people understand that there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of needs on this corridor, but a lot of folks have said it's not the best designed roadway today. So what feedback can we gather? This is just kind of a summary of some of the public engagement that we've done. We had an open house in June. We have a hybrid event tonight. We've had some pop-up events at a Market Basket. We'll be at the Marblehead Library in the afternoon next week. It's very likely we may have another event. I mentioned the video vignette, which is just kind of a recorded version of what we're talking through here today. At a variety of these events, we've advertised online, on social media. Hopefully, if anybody in this room isn't a abutter on this corridor, we did mail out a letter about the project to every abutter in mid-June. And we have an online survey that is still open, which I'll talk a little bit more about, to gather feedback. And then we also hosted sort of office hours in, I believe, late June for any businesses or any potential developers to give us feedback about the corridor. So we've tried to engage in a variety of ways and try to push this. For those who can't attend, there's a number of ways you can still engage. This is just another list of the materials we've had: postcards, flyers, fact sheet. All the information that I've referenced previously is through the MBTA's website. So mbta.com/Lynnway is the project website. I believe the City of Lynn and DCR also have project websites, but most of their information is pointing back to ours at this time. So I talked a little bit a few slides ago about the feedback of why we're here. We really want to understand generally what is working, what's not working, and we've got some questions in our survey about project goals that sort of rate or rank what's important to you all for this project. The survey that hopefully some of you have already taken, and if not, we really encourage you to do so because that's our main vector for taking your feedback. We're taking general feedback about how safe is each mode, what are your feelings, and rating different project goals or sort of ranking them. And then there's also opportunities for really specific feedback, and that's what's really helpful for us to look at where there might be new pedestrian crossings, where is a traffic signal that you feel like isn't working well, where are segments that you feel like have congestion, things like that. And then obviously many of you in person today, as well as a few months ago, have offered feedback through sticky notes or other opportunities through there. So in terms of the survey, I've mentioned to a few of you tonight, we have over 1,300 survey responses thus far. I know maybe given the number of people who drive the Lynnway, that's obviously not 100% of the drivers every day, but for the scale of typical survey responses we receive in this field, that is a really robust survey amount. We've had survey responses from throughout the North Shore, so obviously a healthy contingent of those are from Lynn, but at one point a few weeks ago, 50% of all those respondents were from one of Nahant, Marblehead, or Swampscott. So there has been a broad array of responses throughout the entire area of not only where the project is, but folks who may drive through that project area. And then next steps. So what are we doing? After tonight, we have a few more outreach opportunities, but then we're going to analyze the survey feedback once it closes. It says September 22nd here. If there's any additional meetings, we'll obviously make sure that survey is open long enough to accommodate those meetings and give a few extra days. And then we're going to summarize the type of feedback that we've gotten from that survey. I mentioned there's some general feedback and there's some specific feedback. And so we're going to summarize that. It may take some time, but will be uploaded to the website to summarize what we've heard from folks. And then we will be going into the next phase, which is concept development, like I mentioned a few slides ago, and that's shown on the timeline slide there. So that includes a variety of engineering, what type of ground survey, how much space do we have, is there a difference in grade, are there utilities, all of that type of work that you would do in a typical project, as well as traffic analyses, and certainly while we're here today, your feedback. And then just want to really reiterate, I've heard this in person tonight as well as at other opportunities where we've had to present. There's a lot of other projects that have either recently completed or are under construction or in the planning and design phases, and we've been coordinating very closely with certainly the largest of those, including the GE Bridge. We've been coordinating with the city on those developments very closely, and so both to make sure the design makes sense, that you don't have design elements sort of running into each other, but also so that the construction timelines for those projects make sense. You obviously don't want to have, several miles worth of construction to endure for long periods of time. So we understand the importance of being cognizant of the various planning timelines for these projects. But that's the last slide here. We now have questions for those both in the room as well as on the hybrid portion of this virtually. We do have a hard stop on this meeting at 7:30, so that's about 30 minutes of questions. We will be reading questions from the chat. So Ashley will be reading those, and then I think we have a microphone that we can bring around as well. But I think we're just going to kind of popcorn back and forth to answer those questions, unless you had anything to add, Ashley.
Sure, we can get started now. Before we do, though, I would just like to go over a few controls for everyone, just in case you're not familiar. If you'd like to share a comment, like Philip mentioned, we will accept verbal and written comments, and we ask that you use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be alternating. To speak verbally, you can use the raise hand button, and if you're on the phone, you can press *9. And attendees who speak Spanish, you can raise your hand for our interpreter, and Enrica will be able to repeat any questions or comments that you have. When recognized, you'll be unmuted to speak, and then your hand will be lowered afterward. Before opening the floor to the public, we would like to invite any elected officials or their staff to ask any questions or make any comments, and you can do that using the raise hand feature to be recognized. So I'm just allowing a couple moments for that. And then after that, we can open up the floor. Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, great. We're now opening up the floor for any questions or comments folks have here in the room, as well as virtually. I'll start with the first question virtually, and then we'll go off into the room. The first question is, will the Lynnway be limited to 1 lane for cars going north and south?
So just repeating for folks in the room, hopefully you heard the question was, will the Lynnway be constrained to 1 lane of, what I assume the person asking was 1 lane of general traffic in each direction. And we have given very clear guidance that at minimum for any segment along these 1.6 miles, there will be at least, and it could be more than 2, but at least maintaining 2 lanes of general traffic in each direction. So I know there's been some concern that roadway would be narrowed down to 1 lane in each direction. This is obviously a very critical regional travel way for folks along the entire North Shore. And so I want to clarify that's again emphasizing it could very well be 3 in some sections, but at minimum, we've said this would be 2 lanes in each direction of general purpose traffic.
Okay, and does anyone have, great. You can just raise your hand and we'll get to you.
Hi, Josh Hanford from Nahant. My question is kind of similar, but maybe more specific. Thanks for being here, by the way, and the fact that you said that you don't yet have a conceptual design, I'll take you at your word for that. So my plea really is that we maintain 3 lanes of vehicle traffic in both directions. I can explain why, as you pointed out, we got 1,800 and something new units going in by the Walmart. Soon there'll be more where the old porthole used to be. Revere, they're adding hundreds, if not thousands, every 6 months. And as you know, the state is aggressively encouraging adding more housing units. So reducing the number of traffic lanes from 3 to 2 is counterintuitive. There's also a lot of utilities under the Lynnway. All 3 towns send their sewer system under the Lynnway. So when there's repairs, if there's fewer lanes to reroute traffic, that's tough. You want to encourage people to get down to the new Harbor Park and the enhanced Heritage State Park. So I guess as someone who commonly drives a car north of Lynn, I think that's a concern that I have, and all the people that I've talked about too about this project I think is the overriding concern. So my question is, can we please keep 3 lanes going both directions? Thank you.
I'm going to acknowledge your comment and appreciate that. I appreciate your feedback, I will say. We're definitely considering everybody's feedback and can certainly appreciate there are a lot of folks who drive this corridor and who may not have all the options to do otherwise, but appreciate your feedback and obviously heard the applause afterwards.
Our next question is, would it be cheaper to add pedestrian overpasses? Will there be express buses across the North Shore with designated parking to the airport, Blue Line, downtown, etc.? In most other cities in the U.S. or abroad, the only way this works is with fully express buses or transit. The same person, just two questions.
I'm going to take the first question first, which I believe was pedestrian overpasses, which I think there's one that way, if I'm oriented correctly in this room, as you head out towards the Rotary to get across. That's not necessarily something we've thought to incorporate now, in part because the right-of-way on either side of the Lynnway is fairly constrained, and getting a staircase or the ramp around that is challenging. But like I said, we don't have a concept at this time. So I guess that's the first half of that question. And then could you repeat the second half, Ashley? Just want to make sure I heard all of that.
Yes, the second half to the question is, will there be express buses across the North Shore with designated parking to the airport, Blue Line, downtown, etc.? In most other cities in the U.S. or abroad, the only way this works is with fully express buses or transit.
In terms of express buses, I know there is, separately operated from the MBTA, Massport offers, essentially a Logan Express from the North Shore area to the airport, obviously. It is not in our plan at this time to operate express buses along the Lynnway, at least applicable to this project. And just so everybody's on the same page, my interpretation of express would be, say you got on at the busway over there and it didn't make any stops and it just went straight to Wonderland. That's not something we're entertaining at the MBTA right now for this project. I think I mentioned earlier there is a bus network redesign, which is looking at how can we increase not only the frequency of making sure you wait less time, but really doing that in the morning and in the evening and the weekend for a lot of folks who may be shift workers or other folks, and that's throughout the entire large MBTA service area. But specifically to express buses, that has not been something that's come up at this time.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments here in the room?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lori Kutkowski. I live on Kings Beach, right off of the Lynnway, and travel that route, constantly. So I wish the DCR was here because they're responsible for the condition of the roadway, and nobody's mentioned it, but it's deplorable. And it's been deplorable for decades. The General Edwards Bridge has needed to be replaced for decades as well. So I appreciate that it's on the docket to potentially come up with a concept sometime this fall, but that needs to be done sooner rather than later. 50% of the homes surrounding the Lynnway, as you said, don't even have a vehicle. And it seems like this project is very heavily geared towards bus riders and pedestrians who aren't paying any excise tax. We're paying for it. Those of us, what is the statistic on the number of motor vehicles that go back and forth from Marblehead and Nahant and Salem and even Beverly probably and Swampscott and Lynn into Boston every day and back? What's the statistics on that? Because that far outweighs the number of people that are riding the bus. So while I appreciate having electric vehicles, which I'm all for, and better bus stops and pedestrian walkways, it's treacherous. The gal asked me over there, she goes, do you feel safe driving on the Lynnway? Absolutely not. And you're going to narrow the roadway? It needs to be enlarged. It needs to be expanded. It's treacherous driving on there. You take your life in your hands at 1.6 miles. The roads are already narrow enough, and you're going to take more space to do a bus lane that's like gigantic. And I'm a bike rider. I'm all for bike lanes. But right now, the road is so narrow. It needs to be enlarged. I don't see any plans about enlarging the roadway. That's what we need.
Is there...
I mean, that's what we need.
The question I heard from you was about asking how many cars per day are on the road. That's something that we have on hand. I apologize, I don't want to misquote that. But that's something we can provide you, or if you would like. The majority of this project would be funded by a federal grant, just to make sure, but, right. I mean,
We pay, income taxes, property taxes, I mean, those are the people that you should be worrying about, you know? So that's my opinion, and the question is, where's the plan to enlarge the roadway? Not make it more narrow.
your question is essentially pushing out the curb line to be wider. Well, you're saying the lanes are too narrow. You would rather have like a wider lane?
And you're gonna add a bike lane like that, and the cars are gonna be, I mean, it's already treacherous driving on there, agree? Yeah, it's dangerous. And you want it to be safer and more, calming to drive on there, and you're gonna, jam us in further. It makes no sense.
I appreciate your feedback. I just want to make sure we can get on. I'm not trying to ignore. If you had a specific question, please let me know. But
I would like to know how many cars,
I think
the
we already
statistic on that?
we have a statistic. I don't want to misquote it, but I'm happy to send that to you. I know you've reached out to us already, I believe, Lori. So I'm happy to follow up with you. Thank you. Do we have any?
Okay,
that
so we
wanna
have
switch
two
to?
folks virtually
Okay.
who have raised hands, Alex and George. We're going to start with George, then we'll go to Alex, and then we'll span back into the room again, and then we'll go back into virtual. We'll be alternating. George, please unmute so that you can ask your question or state your comment, please.
For over 60 years, first with my parents, and then when I got old enough to drive, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent driving across that Lynnway. I do agree it needs to be improved, but I think by cutting down the lanes is not the way to go. Do you realize that there's probably over 40 businesses, if not more, on the Lynnway, and every one of them has an entrance and exit. And you take away the right-hand lane on both sides of that causeway, the northbound and not the causeway, the Lynnway, north and southbound side, and you say you're going to have two lanes basically open. Well, with two lanes, now all of a sudden that right lane becomes the only way to get in and out of all these businesses. When you talk about safety, that's where all the accidents happen, basically. It's people coming in and out of those entrances and exits because they're getting frustrated waiting for someone to let them get into the line of traffic. So my thought is by taking away those two right-hand lanes, you're going to increase the risk of more accidents, make it less safe. And I agree with the person that mentioned about the crossovers. I think that's a great idea. I think what you should do is make the sidewalks a little wider, leave the Lynnway as it is. I don't think you need to make it any wider. Leave it as it is, resurface it, put some trees down there so people can walk, ride bikes. Like I said, I've been going down that Lynnway for 60 years. I don't see people taking strolls down the Lynnway. I don't see people riding down the Lynnway. That's an access road to get to and from places from people on the North Shore, like Nahant, like Lynn, although Lynn does have a couple of other exits out of the city. Nahant basically has the one, and that's and same with Swampscott, same with Marblehead, same with Beverly, maybe Beverly not quite as much, but Marblehead, Swampscott, and probably Salem rely on that road, and that traffic is unbelievable. So my question is, would you leave it in three lanes? Because if not, you're going to make the safety even worse. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Appreciate your feedback, George. I think there's similar themes to some of the other comments provided. I think I did want to touch on, a portion of the comment about sort of the driveways entering and exiting. That is certainly an element of safety that I think is something that could be looked at as part of this project. Not adjusting the driveways, but how do you make sure that as you have vehicles turning in and out, that can be done and looked at maybe in a safer manner.
Okay, we're going to Alex. Please unmute.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So my name's Alex, and I think I'm the first Lynn resident to speak. and it was great hearing from our neighboring towns of Nahant. And I just want to be absolutely clear that like the Lynnway in its current form cannot continue to exist. I mean, as someone who actually does walk down the Lynnway from downtown Lynn to get to our wonderful ferry, I see the cars driving at the crazy speeds they do on the Lynnway. It is uninviting. It is not reflective of the Lynn that we're trying so hard to really make and beautify and make it into a place that is welcoming to everyone, right? To pedestrians, to people who bike. I mean, I hear about safety. I don't know about you, but getting hit by a car, the threats of cars are much worse. And I'm someone who also drives, right? Like I completely understand the stress of dealing with traffic. I'm so happy that this project is prioritizing traffic signals because it's true, it's a mess. But let's face it, the Lynnway is 3 lanes on each side. They die off as 3 lanes when they go to Nahant or up the Lynn Shore Drive, and they also die when they go over the bridge onto Shore Road in Revere. So it's only Lynn that has to carry the burden and the pain of having this huge gash in the middle of the city that just invites more and more driving and more traffic. As a business owner, and as someone who's also expecting new housing developments to come on Lynn, if we don't provide folks other ways to get around, guess what they're going to do? They're going to drive. If you give the housing development folks a way to get around on bikes and walking and make it a truly wonderful way to move, then it can work. So anyways, that was just my comment. I also pay property taxes. I felt that comment was a little bit unfair to folks that do prioritize transit. We are, just as equal citizens. My question to the MBTA is, what are we doing about the Lynnway as a way to reflect, how are we getting, how are we getting this information out to riders? I really want to make sure that we're actually advocating for the voice of people who would be taking transit, who do rely on the transit to get to Wonderland every day. How are we engaging with them to make sure that their voices are also being heard? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate the commentary. In terms of pushing that information to riders, I think that is something that, especially as we go into our concept development phase, is an opportunity we need to take a further look at. We have gone to the busway and passed out information, but shy of standing there for 18 or 19 hours, we've also met with some of the community-based organizations in Lynn who have indicated to the city that they have a higher percentage of transit riders. So that's what we've done thus far, but I think there is an additional opportunity to reach out, whether that's what we would call car cards, like leaving something on the bus, or additional outreach at the busway. Some of the higher ridership stops include the Walmart, include near Blossom Street, and obviously the busway itself. But appreciate your question.
So we're now transitioning to the room, so you can feel free to ask your comment or question.
Hi there. I'm from Nahant originally, and now I live in Marblehead. I'm a business owner, and I drive on the Lynnway all the time, and I've driven on the Lynnway my whole life. I have been able to count on maybe 2 hands the amount of bikers that I've ever seen on the Lynnway. The fact that we are trying to encourage pedestrians to be on the Lynnway, I think, is very strange. This is a car road. Because there's only one way into Boston for Nahant, for Lynn, for Swampscott, for Marblehead. You're going to make people's lives way worse by doing this. I guess that it's already happening, so having these meetings feels a little asinine because anybody that drives on that street knows that taking away a lane of traffic, especially when you just moved all of these people into this road, is going to just cause chaos for us. There are snowstorms. That rotary is going to become crazy. I feel like everybody in this room knows that it's bad for all the people that drive on that road. It feels like you are prioritizing a small group of people, like that guy that was just on the phone, over all the people that have lived here and paid taxes here for their whole lives. And I know that it's not you guys doing it, and unfortunately you're the face of it, but this entire project is like trying to fit a square into a round hole. This is not the road to be doing this on. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you. So I live in Lynn, and just a reminder to our neighbors in Nahant, people in Lynn pay taxes, pedestrians pay taxes, people who ride bikes pay taxes. What? I added them. And I take the ferry. I have walked to the ferry. I have taken the bus. I most often drive. I have sometimes biked. I've biked on the sidewalk, and you still see more people on the sidewalk than on the bike lanes. Bikes on the sidewalk. The sidewalks are narrow. You rarely see pedestrians. I don't know if it's too late, but I think one thing that makes the Lynnway scary is people drive too fast. And I don't know that having 3 lanes of traffic versus 2 will slow them down. I would think having 2 might slow them down. I think it is a problem now when it goes from 3 to 2. The signage is in the wrong place. It goes to 2 before you see the sign saying that it's narrowing. That's minor, but a little scary. But if the lanes were wider, and if instead of the segregated bike lane, they had expanded the sidewalk so it was a multi-purpose pathway like the one that is on Lynn Shore Drive. I mean, it seems like it would be unsafe, but it isn't. It's very popular. It's used by lots of people. Of course, it's along the water instead of along the Lynnway. But still, it seems that would be safer and just make more sense. Increase pedestrian traffic, increase bike traffic, and allow a little more space for 2 wider lanes at least at that end of the, and you already have the bikeway, so maybe that's not going to happen, but is that even feasible to still consider redesigning the bike area and to slow down the traffic?
I think the question that and obviously to everybody in here, thank you for your comments. The question that I parsed from that is there still an opportunity to have, I think paraphrasing what you were saying, like a sidewalk level shared use path in the project? I would say absolutely. There's time for, a very large universe of design options in this project. If you're referring to what's already, if I'm pointing the correct place out here with that bike facility, that was not our project, so I can't speak to sort of those impacts, but for the Lynnway project that we're here for tonight, there's time for, whether if you wanted a bike lane on the street or if you wanted one on a shared use path, or many people in here clearly may not want one at all, we're not too late to incorporate those.
Okay, so we do have a hard stop right at 7:30. I'm just going to read one question here in the chat, and then we'll be back in the room again. Stephanie states, first, thank you for addressing this area. It's definitely needed, and I really appreciate that. I'm on the Revere side, and I'd love to be able to bike that way to the beaches, etc. So I'm looking forward to seeing something to be done here. I'm a bike, walk, bus commuter. Can you speak to the potential options being considered for bikers in particular on the stretch? Thanks again.
That was Stephanie, is that correct? Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. So I just talked through some of the potential design options previously. Again, many things are on the table, but at a very high level with any sort of bike facility, you can sort of elevate it and put it on the sidewalk, which is often like a shared use path, or you can have something sort of in the street with a buffer. Truly, everything is on the table. I will say, I think it should be known, I've mentioned earlier in this presentation the replacement of the General Edwards Bridge, which again is a MassDOT project, and I don't have too much knowledge of that, but I do know that I think we're 99% sure that the east side or the ocean side of that new bridge will have some sort of substantial shared use path. So I certainly have heard feedback in the room that nobody's biking on the Lynnway today. Loud and clear I've heard that. But I've heard from several other folks in previous meetings that a lot of the reason people wouldn't bike on the Lynnway is that you get to the bridge and there's no way that you could bike over the bridge. And so I do think, in the spirit of talking about all these projects, there is going to be a shared use path on that bridge. You don't have to bike it, you can walk it, but there's a lot of folks in Revere or Lynn or vice versa who may want to traverse that bridge.
Hi there, my name is Jackie. I'm from Nahant. I'm actually new to Nahant. So I can speak, I think, for a lot of people. For me, as in the medical field, a concern would be for emergency vehicles, right? So if someone's having an emergency crisis, are they going to be stuck in traffic trying to get through? Where are those cars going to go? Especially if we're putting in taking away lanes and adding in more lights. Where are these cars going to go? Is this going to cause more patients to die because they're not able to get medical treatment in time?
Thank you for that question. So I think without knowing the exact concept, I won't speak to specifics, but I will say certainly we will consider that as part of the overall traffic analysis, especially during peak hours. We're very aware, there can be traffic, especially during peak periods on this corridor. I will say other places, whether it's in the MBTA service area or other places, around the country that have bus lanes, we have spoken to EMS folks in Boston, Cambridge, Everett, Malden in particular, who have spoken very positively of those bus lanes because any EMS, fire police, EMS can use those lanes and they have a straight shot down the road. So I did want to highlight that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to take some hand raises virtually. There have been a couple. And then I'm going to have this in-person comment and then another in-person comment, and we should be at time. Dawn, your hand has been raised for a while. Would you like to unmute yourself so that you can ask your question or state your comment?
I'm sorry I got on late. I live right off of Lynn Shore Drive, and I have for 20 years. I'm sorry that I missed the beginning of the call, but my question is, can you tell me quickly why we are even considering a dedicated bus lane when you sat there and watched the Marblehead buses going down the road? You'll always see that they're rarely packed at all. I guess that's my first question.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one first, just so I don't forget if it's a two-parter. The genesis of looking at enhanced transit infrastructure for this project came out through a planning effort called the Lynn Transit Action Plan. That was an effort led by MassDOT with significant participation from not only the MBTA, but the city, elected officials, others. That plan did end, a few years ago, but a center running bus lane was identified as a recommendation from that planning effort. So that is, in my best understanding, the genesis of where that specific idea came from. I think more generally, we touched on, and I understand you may have joined late, some of the transit statistics about the corridor, but also talking about, transformationally working with the city as new developments are added, making sure that those households have valid travel options that are not a motor vehicle or some of the other interests that we've had.
Well, I don't know anything about that. I'm not sure why we weren't in on that, but I'm sure we could have been. The other thing is, I noticed when the GE bridge closed down recently because DOT all of a sudden felt it was an emergency when it's been in a disastrous state of affairs for many years. All that did was cause a 2-hour backup from Wonderland Station into Walmart because of the merge coming off of Revere Beach. So I guess my question is, every time there is a merge, no matter where you go in the state, you will see that there is a traffic congestion and backup. So when we have that dedicated bus lane, where is it going to begin and where is it going to end? Allegedly at this point.
I appreciate your feedback and question. We are looking at a number of different options. Could it be primarily in the northbound or the southbound direction? Are there opportunities to really dig into some of the very robust data that the MBTA has to, place those bus lanes where they're needed most? So we're looking at a variety of different opportunities for, is this a wholesale bus lane? Is this tactically deployed? There's a lot of different design sort of tools in our toolkit, if you will, to look at how to implement a design that makes sense given the context that we have. We have bus lanes in our system elsewhere, but I think I really want to affirm that we're not just trying to copy and paste the design that may be in the heart of Cambridge or Boston to somewhere in the Lynnway. There's a lot of context that, we hope we can convey at a later date when we have a concept.
So when you get the concept, I know you're close to time, how many more meetings are we gonna be able to, address our concerns? And are our concerns really gonna be addressed?
I can't speak to the exact outreach plan for the concept phase yet. We just don't have the exact number of meetings addressed offhand, so I don't want to misspeak there, but it certainly will be multiple meetings that folks can provide feedback.
Okay, and just one more thing, can you please keep in mind that that GE bridge is going to close down in 2 years. And we have no resolution for that at this point in time with all the lanes that are available. So I would hope that you could keep that in mind, please, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Don, thank you. Thank you, everyone in the room.
I'm happy to take 2 questions. I know we can go over it. We'll take 2 questions in the room.
Okay, so there are people that have been holding for a while, so just one moment. We're just gonna.
While it gets passed over, I just want to know if you leave a question or a comment on the comment form, we also can answer them and post them online on the website.
Would anyone like to write a comment on the comment form now? I can hand them to you if you'd like, or you can go to Kirsty. Okay, great. So,
Yeah, I mean, part of the question is, I work on the Lynnway, part of the question is why? Like what, I don't see the need in your own numbers. I don't see the 50% near, I don't know what that represents as near. But also, given that it's mostly commercial, I don't understand why we need to do a whole entire overhaul of this area to have bus stops where there aren't pedestrians or bikes. So I just want to know more about the why, because the discovery doesn't seem to be, like, there seems to be reasons why you guys can find ways to spend the money, but I don't understand why we need that here. So I want more on the why, and also I want to know if there's, you guys said you're collaborating with the city on it. I want to know if there's any eminent domain plan for any of the hardworking business owners might be impacted by this. That's my 2 questions.
Sure, thank you. In terms of the why, I'll sort of speak back to the various plans and studies that highlighted the need for a redesign. Those were performed by really all 4 of the agencies involved. I think some of the key takeaways were the high crash corridor statistics, looking at ways partnering with the city on their vision for this area, making it a little bit more transformational where folks have multiple options to move other than in a motor vehicle. And then I apologize, your second question was what? I'm so sorry. Eminent domain. Eminent domain.
Business owners.
Sure. No, absolutely, I apologize. In terms of right-of-way and those types of impacts, that is certainly something that is very high on the list while we are looking at concept development. I can't speak to, anything about where or how much or not at all, but obviously that would be a very key part of any sort of future coordination. Ideally, it is something that we are going to avoid. It has several cascading impacts. Obviously, first and foremost, folks like yourselves who have businesses there, but it also really complicates environmental review and other processes. So we are collecting ground survey and right-of-way research information as part of this project. This is a very, very old roadway, and so there's some dissonance, if you will, between some of those right-of-way records that we have to resolve as part of our engineering research.
My name is Jen. Oh, that's really loud. I just want to ask that for the future, any communications also be relayed to the town of Nahant, Swampscott, and Marblehead. If I was not friends with a former city councilor who posted the survey on his Facebook page, many of us would not even know. And when I look around this room, I'm counting at least 20 people from Nahant, and I know the people from Nahant in the last meeting, as well as some people have spoken from Swampscott. So I feel like we're really being left out. And when you think about the Lynnway usage, The majority of the usage is from people from Nahant, Swampscott, and Marblehead. We travel it every single day, numerous times. Probably 70% of Lynn and its citizens don't ever travel the Lynnway. It's Nahant, Swampscott, and Marblehead. And we're the ones that should be included in every single communication. Our town administrators, our Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jane.
I think this is the last comment. Thank you all.
Hi. I'm wondering why the buses get priority over us.
You're asking sort of the general concept of a bus lane or transit priority in general? Is that
Yeah,
the
why
question?
they get priority in this plan? Why
this
are
pl-
we kicked out and they get the better lane, they drive by? I think that you want to make it so that it's really bad for us, so that we'll go to public transportation. I don't think that's going to work, but I think that's the plan. It's just going to make it harder for us. Why does the bus get a priority over us? That's my question.
Thank you. I will speak generally to sort of the concept of transit priority or bus lanes in general. You know, typically the goal there, especially when you have very high ridership, high frequency buses, I know that's not necessarily the case on every bus trip here today, but we're also looking at this project as a projection going forward with changing land use along the Lynnway. If you have 15, 20, sometimes 40, sometimes 60 people packed in a vehicle, you're moving 60 people versus you know, in one vehicle versus, you know, 1, 2, 4, 5 in a single car. So that is the overall benefit of having a transit priority facility. I'm sorry?
I'm not petrified, but I don't want to go on public transportation.
Thank you. Okay, that was our last comment for the night. I really appreciate everybody joining virtually and joining
Okay,
obviously here today.
while we end though, I would just like to let everyone know, if you'd like to comment more, you can scan the QR code here for our survey. We also have feedback forms here with Kirsty, so please take one. We are collecting the feedback, we are reviewing it, and we will be replying to you and answering any other questions that you have virtually. Thank you.